Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. My guests are subject matter experts whose unique perspectives will help listeners understand how the issues impact them. Let's get into The Real Spill. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. With me today is one of my favorite volunteers and advocates that I'm able to work with through the Greenville Homeless Alliance, DeAndra, DJ Hillman. DJ, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. And DJ and I, in full transparency, this is our second time recording this, and this is the real spill, and this is my real life. So it turns out that having your microphone really helps when you're recording a podcast. And my doggies were barking a little bit, so I appreciate DJ coming back on today. To talk with me again. So this is a repeat of a wonderful conversation that we had before. So I'm excited for listeners to get to learn more about you today and about what it is that the Homeless Alliance is doing here in our community in Greenville, South Carolina.
So, thank you.
Of course. To start off, I know you're with the Homeless Alliance now, but can you share your background? What were you doing that led you to the position you're in now?
So previously to being a housing advocate for Greenville Homeless Alliance, I was in sales, done UPS sales, inside sales for about 4 years, and then tons of customer service before then. I worked in banks that customer service and also a mortgage specialist. So just a lot of dealing with people in general. And then prior to this position, I also worked at Rebuild Upstate as a community engagement specialist. So that was kind of like my intro into housing world in Greenville.
Oh, yeah. You see through those projects what people are dealing with and what they're facing in their homes and in the needs that they have.
Mm-hmm. And with Rebuild, those are individuals that own a home, but you often come across a lot of individuals that are at risk of just simply not being safe in their home. It's just one of the needs that Greenville has in the housing world.
And we, with Upper State Apartment Association, have volunteered with Rebuild and have done some ramps and porches. And like you say, there's situations where people are just simply not safe in their homes. So it's so important for those organizations to do the heavy lifting, literally, to help those folks in need.
Right. Yeah, it's an awesome organization. And they thrive off their volunteers. So without the volunteers, the work doesn't really get done.
No, and thank goodness they have an expert on the scene, because a lot of us that work in housing have many talents, but construction and building is a niche.
Yeah, it's awesome to have a lead person there and walk you through it. And ramp is one of those things that with a group of people, anybody can do as long as you have somebody leading. So it's one of those projects that they use volunteers for often. Those bathroom rebuilds or floor constructions are things they typically outsource to the experts. But a ramp, that's for anybody.
Oh, yeah. And it gives you a sense of accomplishment once you've left a project like that and knowing that that individual is going to have better use of their space and better quality of life because you volunteered your time.
It's kind of blacking out. I'm sorry, my internet's going in and out.
Oh, you're good. They'll fix it in production. No big deal at all. And no worries. And so when did you know that you wanted to help end homelessness?
I tell people honestly, for me it's personal. I grew up in this community. I have a ton of family members, a ton of family friends that are often on the streets. I've grown up as kind of the resource person, the person people look to go and research, and she'll help you fill out this application. She'll look for this apartment here. So that was kind of just my role in my family growing up. And as Greenville grows, as more people move here, I just saw the problem increasing. And I just want to be a part of the solution. Raising a family, I want to be a part of a community that my children can thrive in, and knowing that we're part of the solution as well. So that's been kind of my motivation, my reason. It's very personal for me.
Yeah, Yeah, and for those who don't know, just a major highlight on what DJ does as far as community engagement and events. We've hosted what, 2 events so far this year?
Yes, yes, very proud of that. Very proud of that. We have been able to bring landlords and housing providers to the table, educating them, but also providing them with resources to give back to their tenants when they're in danger or in the struggle with being able to pay their rent.
Oh, yeah. And in those situations, time is of the essence, and getting them that information quickly is something that has been worked on. And the website is live now
Yes.
for resources here in our area. I know that's something that the Homeless Alliance is very proud of.
Most community resources can be found on our website, gblhomes, the number 4all.org. And then recently, the county has launched a website specifically to help individuals facing eviction from a tenant standpoint as well as a landlord, providing resources. And that website is eviction in gblcounty.org.
Definitely want to encourage our housing providers and listeners, if you're in this area and you're a housing provider, or if you're a resident and you happen upon this podcast, that these resources are out there and they're out there to help you. I feel like I can speak on behalf of landlords, having been a housing provider myself, working in property management for over 20 years on site. You don't want to evict people. You don't want to see people lose their home. It's absolutely a last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And having those resources quickly is key. And it's
Right.
wonderful what you guys are doing, the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a ton of work, but I think just helping our neighbors is that's a community effort. It's a way we can come together and provide people with resources of how to get help, and also and just encouraging people to speak up. If you have an issue or if you're in danger, we see that people often wait for the last minute to reach out for help, and by that time it's almost too late sometimes.
For sure. And they've got to swallow their pride and go to the people who can help them. It was something I tried to do as a property manager. It was to tell the residents when they would sign their lease, I'd go out and introduce myself as the manager and say, if you ever get into a situation where you can't pay your rent, I don't want you to think that I should be the last person you should call. I should be the first person, because I'm connected to resources that can help you. And you don't want that turnover as a manager either, because depending on your
Right.
market, you may not be able to refill it. But a vacant unit not collecting rent and an occupied unit not collecting rent are six of one and half dozen of the other. So you'd rather keep that unit occupied if you can. And
Right.
it's important. Can you give some insight into the work of the Homeless Alliance? You've talked a bit about the stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, so Greenville Homeless Alliance right now, well, I wouldn't say right now, but generally, we educate and advocate for homelessness in Greenville County. Over the past year, our focus has just been on chronically homeless individuals, which means an individual has been on the street for a year or more, and then they have some sort of disability, whether that's developmental or physical or mental. And we have a ton of individuals on the street that have income. I heard the statistic last week: 85 of the individuals that are chronically homeless have income. It just isn't enough to get them into the housing with the market in Greenville County right now. So my work specifically has been trying to house a total of 24 individuals a year and move them into permanent housing, connecting them. A big part of that work is connecting with landlords and housing providers, but we also work very closely with our frontline service providers who actually, case manage these clients that are chronically homeless.
That's so important. And the market right now, rents are high. They are very high. And as an industry, we're trying to address that with trying to pass the YIMBY Act to reduce the barriers to development of affordable housing. We're being told that's likely to pass this year, which will trickle down to the municipalities. And hopefully, with more building, hopefully, the more supply we have to meet up with the demand. And inflation has impacted this too. So we're hoping to see
Yes.
that level out a little more in the coming years to hopefully get people to a place where they're not rent poor or mortgage poor. Like, they're pouring
Yeah.
everything they have into their rental payment, and then they're having to make a decision, do I keep the lights on? Well, I have to. It's part of the lease agreement.
Or
Or
do I go
do I
eat?
buy groceries?
Yeah, rent burden is honestly a lot of us are, and just having a stable household or a stable roof over your head has been priority. But food and medical care, transportation, getting back and forth to work, all those things are important too. I think the word affordable has been defined in many ways in our community. I think the real definition should it actually is paying no more than 30% of your income towards rent and utilities, not half, not 75%, just 30%. And that I don't think that's really been broadcasted as it should be. We just kind of throw around the word affordable and not really stating what it means.
Oh yeah, and I've had the conversation with colleagues of affordable housing and housing affordability are two different things, and the conversation should be steered more around housing affordability. And when you're qualifying a resident, oftentimes they have to make 3 times the rent. And
Yes.
I think you and I've had the discussion, and this was my case when I was on site. There were times I didn't make 3 times the rent at a property that I was working at. And I see the post on, because I'm part of, several Facebook groups. I see the post of, I bet my landlord doesn't even make 3 times the rent. And they're right. A lot of times
Yeah,
they
I've
don't
seen
even
that too.
yeah, it's true. Like, oftentimes if rental discounts weren't given, the staff wouldn't even be able to afford to live at
Right.
properties. Sometimes it's
Yeah, those barriers they're kind of the thorn in my side with trying to house individuals. That 3 times the rent is like, that's the biggest one for me because a lot of the individuals that I am trying to house are seniors that are on a fixed income, whether that's Social Security, disability, or any type of retirement funds. It's usually no more than at the most, it's probably around 1,400. But that's the going rate for one bedroom in Greenville County. So, yeah, making more than that, 3 times the rate of that is insane sometimes. But then, of course, you have the barrier around criminal background, and then evictions. Evictions is just as important as the criminal background these days. So with those three things coupled, it makes this position really, really hard to place individuals into permanent housing.
absolutely. And now I know you guys work with a lot of stakeholders. How do you work with those stakeholders to help people obtain housing?
So Greenville Homeless Alliance is our approach with this work is a collective impact. We work with our stakeholders, our partners, the frontline service providers, businesses, churches. We're gathering the resources to provide back and then also educating them and advocating on behalf of our homeless population. We have been running off of what's called working groups, which you understand you've been part of our collaboration working group, but we also have our Innovate working group, and they've been the group that comes with those innovative ideas and where they've seen things work in other communities and trying to see what it's like to bring it back to Greenville. And then our advocacy working group and education working group. Those have been really the backbone of our organization and bringing in individuals that see it every day and that can bring a different piece together for solutions.
Yeah. And so with the services that are
Sorry, can you
provided,
hear me?
what services in general does the Homeless Alliance provide to the community?
So we're not in direct service. We don't have direct clients or anything like that. Our work is really through our stakeholders and our partners. We're trying to change things at a system level. Homelessness is really, it starts as a system. So we're working with, a local government and, our individual stakeholders to get the work done, to come up with a solution together to end homelessness here in Greenville. And making sure that if anybody doesn't, get impacted by homelessness, that their occurrence is rare and brief, and making sure that they can get back on track and that they don't fall back into the cycle of homelessness.
Yeah, because once someone has become homeless, I can imagine it's even that much more difficult to obtain housing after you've
Right.
been through that. And a lot of times it's come with an eviction on their record. And
Yeah, unfortunately, the thing with evictions is trying to prevent it before it happens. I think if you can, if the organizations can help individuals stay into housing by addressing the root issues that are causing the financial problem, because that's the number one reason for eviction, right? Non-payment of rent. So trying to catch an individual before that eviction actually happens and it's on the record is the best way to go about preventing homelessness.
Yeah, and it starts with that open communication between the housing provider and the resident, letting all parties know what's going on, having that immediate access to resources so that if that person needs, if that company allows like a promissory note or a payment plan, a lot of the stakeholders provide those services. It was interesting to hear that there are several management companies who provide flexible payment plans for
Yes,
their
that's
residents.
one of the big things that's growing, and it's so exciting because everybody doesn't have first month's rent and deposit in a lump sum up front. So being able to, prorate or pay over time a security deposit, if you split it up in 12 months over your lease, or, asking for reasonable accommodations, if you get paid the 15th or the 3rd of the month, being able to pay your rent when you get paid. It's exciting to hear that, landlords and housing providers are willing to work with individuals with these new innovative ideas to help individuals.
Yeah, and I think a lot of housing providers would be shocked to find out because I was. I heard the founder of our firm say this at a fair housing class he was teaching, and it blew me away that you would think that it would be discriminatory to allow resident A to pay their rent on the 15th when you don't allow resident B or C. But when you look at
Yes,
it through the lens of an accommodation, that's where the ease could come in, that could be a way that that person could be accommodated. I would have never thought that changing the rent due date would have been a possibility, but it absolutely is. And listeners, if they're housing providers, reach out to your general counsel. And if you're one of our clients, I don't necessarily link our firm with my podcast, but if you know me and you're a client of ours, reach out to the attorney that handles your cases and ask that question if that's a reasonable accommodation that could be made, because it could keep someone housed. And we've talked briefly, and Heather that works with the Homeless Alliance, she and I are going to have a call later on today. We're going to be talking about expungement and record sealing where an eviction has been dismissed or the debt has been paid in full, so making both parties whole. We don't have that right now in South Carolina.
right. Once it's on your record, it's on your record. It's stuck. And we have no way of removing it, and it really hinders a lot of individuals. I've seen in situations where an eviction comes up on their record, and it was from years ago. Even if someone goes to court and wins the case, it's still on their record. It's unfortunate. So I'm very excited to hear that possibility of expungement is coming. I think it'll help a lot of individuals.
Yeah, and we're fixing to start the legislative session here in South Carolina. So, and we have a lot of new members of the General Assembly this year. So, of course, the organizations I'm involved with through the apartment associations and both with the Homeless Alliance, we have access to those lawmakers and can likely collaborate and come up with some solution there. Because even if there's a mistake, as a housing provider, say I have a roommate situation and a roommate release has been signed. If I don't have that information properly in the software, or if that piece of paper, because some of the softwares don't allow you to remove the name during the course of the lease. It's called like a roommate promotion or something to that effect. So if you don't remove that roommate's name that has signed the release and an eviction is filed erroneously on that person who has been legally released from the contract, there's not even a way for that person to go in. So if you have Sally and Jane's been released from the lease, but the housing provider makes a mistake, and we're all human beings, we're all flawed and are capable of making mistakes, makes that mistake, that could affect Jane for the rest of her life.
Yeah,
Right now.
that's really unfortunate. And we see that happen more and more often, especially in this climate. Like I said, as the market grows, landlords, I'm sure, have a ton of applications for one unit, and they're looking for a way to, lease people out. And having an eviction on your record, that's like one of those top ones where that application is out the door. And then, like you stated, these softwares, a lot of them are automated. They just take a look at general information. If there's been an eviction, if there's a criminal background, not really looking into things on a case-by-case basis. It just spits out a denial or an approval. You're not really looking at the person.
That's something that I saw too when I was on site. Sometimes you could have a situation to where like one particular that I had, someone had a criminal background, and it was like indecent exposure. And looking at it, and we weren't allowed to tell the person what it was that we had found on their background. So you get in some issues with discrimination. But I'd seen it, and I was, I was curious, like, what in the world? And so he volunteered the information. We're in the area where you have two major universities that are always in competition, Clemson University and Carolina. He was at a Clemson game, one of the ACC championship games, and the portable restrooms were all full. So he went to the restroom kind of behind them, and an officer was there, and he got arrested. He was going through the process of expungement, and we ended up being able, the company I worked for, to make an exception for him. He was going through the process, had to provide us with some paperwork, but sometimes people end up with things on their record like that, or it might be from 20 years ago, and if it's not a violent crime, it was a minor thing, and changes in the law can affect that too. If certain things are labeled differently, it wouldn't necessarily impact the person as much before. But I have a feeling, and this is what would happen to me when I would have residents or potential residents call me. They would say, I've got X, Y, or Z on my background. And I knew how to skirt that line where I'd say, okay, I don't want to take their money because I know what the software is going to do.
Right.
And it's going to keep happening all over town. And I would say, I'll tell you what, I've been doing this a long time. You're going to get the same result, same answer. You're going to get your declined application. Find a private landlord. Do you find, DJ, that it's easier sometimes to work with the independent rental owners to house people and help with the problem of homelessness?
I do find it easier. The problem is a lot of people are now using property management softwares and companies. It's not, we have very few mom and pop landlords anymore. And if you do have them, especially in Greenville, they don't usually live here anymore. They own properties here, but they're not here, which is where it comes, very easy to a property management to take on them as a client, to make sure that things are taken care of since they're no longer in. But they are a little bit more lenient. They usually all they care about is making sure that they're going to get their rent on time and that the property isn't going to be damaged. All the other stuff, they don't typically care about.
Is that what you find to be the most common barrier to housing, is criminal background screenings and evictions on the record?
Criminal background and affordability would be the top two things that make it extremely hard to house individuals. I have worked with Affordable Upstate and their property management company, NOAA Property Management. They've been great, honestly, about helping to move individuals from homelessness into permanent housing. And, they're really lenient as far as the evictions, as long as you can prove that, you can afford the unit. Even if you have a background, they check back 2 years. As long as you can afford the unit, they're pretty much willing to rent to you. And that's what we need more of in the community, individuals and property management companies that are willing to see the people and not really their situations or judgment based off their situations, trying to really understand what happened and giving second chances. But I do understand, as a property owner, as a landlord, it's a business, so you do want to make sure that you're going to get, your money.
It's definitely, it's a for-profit industry for sure.
Yes.
And it's great, though, that there are companies like NOAA and Affordable Upstate. Actually, our Upper State Apartment Association board president works for NOAA, Mark Sharp. He also has a podcast here on the Multifamily Media Network called the Multifamily Mixtape. And so Mario Brown with Affordable Upstate was able to join for the last collaboration meeting. And was he able to share? Unfortunately, I had to miss that. I had to be in Wilmington for an event that day. Was he able to share some of those ideas? I'm assuming so, with the housing providers and attendants.
Had a ton of solutions. I think it was very insightful. Honestly, a lot of our Q&A questions were for Mario with their solutions that they've put in place, because they're really trying to help the community as a whole with, flexible payment. And he mentioned that they use something called pave, basically you connecting your bank account to make sure that you can afford a unit. This is a gig economy. Everybody doesn't work the same job. Everybody doesn't everybody's not working a 9 to 5. So that is giving individuals the option to show, hey, I can afford this. I may not have paycheck stubs or, what typical landlords are asking for, but I can afford this unit. So just being innovative and allowing people to even the process, the application, all that stuff is online, which means, he mentioned if an individual were to get bad news that they didn't get approved, well, at least you didn't have to take off work and come all the way into the leasing office to do that. Or, everything can be done, which makes it convenient to individuals in this day and age.
Sure, because a lot of folks don't have transportation. Depending on areas that they've moved from, they may not have transportation to get back and forth. I know Greenville's done a lot of work with the Green Link to try to
Mm-hmm.
help.
Yeah, they're one of our stakeholders as well.
To and from. And
yeah, trying to grow our bus line outside of the city is one of the tasks that they have, and they definitely have an uphill battle. But I think the need has been recognized. Everybody doesn't live in the city, so although a lot of the resources are in the city, a lot of jobs and a lot of housing are outside of the city. So transportation is a barrier there as well.
Our industry was advocating a few years ago for a bill called Build More Housing Near Transit. It was the Build More Housing Near Transit Act a couple years ago it hoped to increase the development of housing close to transit. So when people move to a new area, a lot of them are moving from places that they didn't need a car. And that was often a question I used to think was interesting because I grew up in the country and you had to have a car to get anywhere. Thinking when people would call, like, hey, where's your closest bus stop? And I'm like, walkability is a new score. We're relatively new for the multifamily industry to try to find communities that have that walkability and neighborhoods that you can walk to the store or you can hop on the bus and get to work. Just everything is so much closer. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned stakeholders. If someone wants to become a stakeholder with the Homeless Alliance, how would they go about that process?
Yeah, they can reach out to us either online. Our phone numbers and email addresses are online. GVOHome, the number 4all.org. There's a contact form they can reach out. Feel free to give us a call or, email us to let us know. We're happy to set up a meeting and kind of see how we can partner and work together. Also, joining our working groups has been a great way that individuals get involved.
We're going to be starting for 2025 pretty soon. We're wrapping up 2024, but looking forward to 2025. So that'll be here before we know it.
Yeah.
Is it the same process for housing providers?
2025 is here. And I'm excited, especially with our collaboration working group. I think we have a pathway with these events, and landlord engagement is so needed in this community, and helping landlords to realize that they are really part of the solution to end homelessness. I'm really excited about what's to come with these landlord engagement events.
Yeah, the last one was very well attended, from what I understand. Lots of folks, and may even outgrow the space for next time.
Yes, it was great, and we had panelists, and because it was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we had a lived experience person come in and share her story regarding eviction and how it's impacted her long term. It was a really great event. Our panelists were awesome and amazing, and we had a lot of landlords in the room, just honestly sharing their candid, honest, blunt opinions and asking, questions and asking about resources. And we're happy to be able to provide that to them, the resources.
Yeah, and those conversations are so important, and they can be difficult. They can be tough conversations because they're strongly opinionated landlords and based on their lived experience and what they've gone through. And sometimes I can say over the years, I have to make my brain switch to the good because sometimes some of the negative experiences leave you a little jaded and thinking that that might represent the entirety of residents, but really it's not the case. There's some really wonderful people who live in rental housing. They're your average everyday person, and it's so important to have those conversations in those environments, albeit sometimes difficult or uncomfortable, so that more clarity can be gained. I think sometimes people tend to fear or question what they don't understand. And
Right.
the more they question, though, the more conversation, the more understanding they have, it can reduce that fear. I don't want to say defensiveness, but make them more likely to come to the table. And like, nobody's going to bite here. Like we're
Right.
really all working towards the same goal. We just all have different lived experiences to bring to the
Right.
table to discuss.
And we want to hear those viewpoints, right? We want to know the different experiences so that we can put solutions in place, or help come up with a solution. I think, everybody, a lot of times people feel like things don't apply to them, or it does have like this negative connotation, but we genuinely want to work with landlords and get their point of view so that we can come up with a solution together that benefits landlords and tenants.
And if a landlord wants to become part of the Homeless Alliance, would they follow that same process of either sending an email or going to the website?
Yes, and there's also a tab on our website, the resource tab. But then there's from the resource tab, you can get to the housing navigator where my contact information is. Please reach out to me. I'm always happy to meet new landlords, new housing providers. I love to connect. I'm happy to meet at a coffee shop or go to lunch.
For sure. And I hope folks that are listening that are in this area will take advantage if it's something that they've been having their heartstrings tugged for and want to participate in.
Yeah,
You're the exact right person for them as the housing navigator to help connect them with a resident that will pay their rent and will take care of the community or the property while they're there. And I know we've discussed some challenges today, but can you tell me about a time where you celebrated success?
I'm in this role. I'm looking for success at all times, but I think recently just housing individuals and placing individuals that have been in shelter a long time. One of the first individuals that I was able to house was an individual that was on the registry. He had been in shelter for over 1,000 days, and just could not find a landlord that was willing to rent to him. Had income. I would say he's a great person. Individuals, they have things that come up in past lives, and they do their time for them, and then to come out and they're faced with having to still deal with those barriers. Being able to place them into housing was, a great feeling. It was a success. There was no specific way that we celebrated other than like it just was a feeling of accomplishment, and being able to give somebody dignity to move out of shelter and into their own space, where they can cook their own meals. They, can live as they see fit.
That there has to be a mental health capacity to
Oh
this,
yes,
to or a component to this.
yes,
As folks have gone through homelessness, I'm sure that person just to cook a meal in their own home for the first time, just
yeah. It's those things are the things that warm my heart. Moving individuals in, but what I'm also learning is there's still a need once they're moved into housing. They still need community. They still need support. And oftentimes, what we just didn't think about was just something as simple as furniture, a bed. I recently moved an individual into housing, but he only had a sleeping bag. So realizing that, there's still other needs for an individual that is chronically homeless, moving into housing without furniture. There's a statistic out there. They're more likely to vacate if it doesn't have furniture. So there's still needs on the back end. And it does, it takes a community, and we rely on our stakeholders and our partners, like Miracle Hills and their thrift store, Salvation Army. They do provide vouchers for individuals. So very, very thankful to our frontline service providers that will continue that case management after an individual moves into health.
yeah. And we talked about this before when we spoke about the difference between an affordable community and a conventional community, and that affordable doesn't have to mean subpar, that you should not be able to walk into an affordable community versus a conventional community and immediately tell the difference, like, oh, this is one of the
Right,
affordable units.
right. It's about dignity at the end of the day. Like, what would you want to live in? Yeah, that's an important piece that we definitely want our listeners to take note. There shouldn't be a difference.
No, they're not subpar humans. They don't deserve subpar housing. And what would you want listeners to know? What's something that they would be shocked to learn about homelessness?
My favorite statistic. I would say I think with most individuals in this climate, as inflation is going on, it's hard for everybody, but most of us don't realize that we are just one paycheck away from being homeless ourselves. I think the statistic is 54% of individuals are, yeah, one paycheck away from being homeless, and it takes something as easy as a flat tire and having to pay to go get that replaced, or choosing between groceries and a light bill, and it's those day-to-day things that individuals just don't think about that can land you in this space. I think people don't feel like it can happen to them, and it can. You find, think about your teachers and the bus drivers that are driving their kids to school, and their income, if something was to happen, where would they end up? More than likely into homelessness, or an individual going through a divorce, and the court cost that comes with that, the stress, the mental instability there. Like it literally can happen to anybody.
And very quickly, which is why it's so important for folks to know that there are resources out there and organizations to help and to check their pride, and also for landlords to remember, and preaching to the choir here as one myself, but may we never get so high that we look down on another person, because we could find ourselves in their shoes easily. And oftentimes I've found in my life, what we maybe criticize or side eye in another person, oh, get comfortable, because you're going to find yourself in that position yourself.
Oh,
and get
yes.
a little dose of humble pie.
Life is such a humbling experience, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's so important to give to community and to be part of the solution. And we've talked about before, just we could complain about, oh, this is the way things are, or we can take our seat at the table and do something to bring about positive change going forward, creating that ripple.
Yeah. And I would also say to your listeners, like, it's a community issue. Even if you're not a person that, is easily pulling of the heartstrings, right? If you're talking about tax dollars, it is very expensive for individuals to be out on the street. You're paying for, those trespassing charges when they go and visit a jail. You're paying for those emergency visits. It is much cheaper to, help house somebody than it is to have them on the street.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I had a great conversation, and I'm going to have Tina on in a few weeks, with Tina Belgi, about childcare in housing and what that could look like. There's so many options, and tax dollars, they're there. I bring that up because the tax dollars are there in Greenville County, and she's gotten some nods of approval. And we talked through some of the legalities, because you can't, like in the lease agreement, like you can't run a business out of an apartment, but there are certain things that you can do. So I'm excited for that conversation too, because that's another component. And to your point, tax dollars are there, and it's better use of them to house people than to continue the cycle of homelessness that so many are on.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about that. That you are having Tina on. I'll definitely tune into that. Sounds like
for
an
sure.
interesting conversation to be had.
Yes, yes. And she's run for public office before. And I'll say this again when I have her on. It's because of her and the connection to the Greenville Housing Fund that, as a housing provider, I did not have to evict not one person during the pandemic. She helped me keep 14 apartments occupied, 14 families in their homes, obtaining over $40,000 in rent paid right to the landlord, to me. And that was instrumental, but it opened the door to me even being able to volunteer with you guys on the collaboration group, because she brought me to the table. And she's another industry advocate for housing affordability, and just for creating better communities, and just great person all around. We're all very fortunate to have the both of you in your respective roles, working so hard for the community. And we've talked a little about this before. How would changes in the law help end homelessness?
I think what we talked about previously with housing court and those expungements, those are things that have to be changed that, with the lawmakers. And I think that having access to housing court and tenants' right to counsel and expungement or eviction, those are all things that are going to help the solution. that'll help put more people in housing. I think eventually, as inflation hits its, stand, that line where it just kind of pans out, looking at possibly raising wages, minimum wage. I think that's one of the biggest issues. The minimum wage just doesn't meet the housing market. So I think there's a lot that can be done from that level to help come up with a solution to the problem, but also prevent the problem from happening.
Yeah, and we've talked in our collaboration group. Listeners will be, I guess, shocked to hear that we've been talking about housing court in Greenville. It's not something I've really discussed a lot, but the model for it, I was able to have a look at, and I shared it with some of the attorneys from our firm because it's in Charleston already, which is the model
Right.
that this is based
Also,
on.
Richland County, I believe.
Yep, Richland. We have attorneys in the Low Country that are in housing court. Like that's their Thursday or what have you. I could look on their calendar now and see, but it's the day of the week that they go. And I think landlords are scared of that topic. Landlords don't want housing court. I feel like we're going to see pushback there from landlords on housing court, but I think it goes back to that education piece. Once they're educated on what it actually is, because sometimes they just want possession, but a lot of times that person there's other issues. It's not just non-payment, but they filed for non-payment because in South Carolina, the only remedy for default of non-payment of rent is payment of rent, unless you have a maintenance defense, which then the plaintiff and defendant, and not legal advice, just information, just from doing it for a while. Not an attorney. I don't even play one on a podcast. Exactly. Yes. Disclosure, disclaimer. But then if they had a maintenance situation, they have to give the landlord a 14-day notice to cure that. And if that doesn't happen, that's really the only way that a maintenance defense, sometimes a judge will hear it and sometimes they won't. But by and large, they're filing for, like you said, non-payment. And the only remedy for that is payment of rent. But when you go in with a housing court attorney, it's two attorneys in the room and they sit down and they're the ones negotiating. So it wouldn't necessarily change much about eviction court, like as from a standpoint of a landlord that would go to court. And if you're versed on this too, help me out. The way that I think that it is so the landlord files a rule to vacate. Mm-hmm. The resident is served with that rule to vacate, but along with the rule to vacate is a form telling them that if they would like to see if they qualify for housing court, to bring certain documentation with them to the hearing, and they have to return that so that they know that they're coming. So they show up for housing court, which would be a centralized court. So it wouldn't be one of our 5 or 6 magistrates' offices. It would be specific housing court. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then when they get there, they go through the qualification process at that point.
And one of the things that I want to mention about housing court, even from a landlord perspective, I think that the process will definitely speed it up because now where it's set up, going to different, whatever magistrate, the timing of the eviction is depending on which court you're attending. Having things streamlined, I believe, would speed up the process for the landlords. But the biggest thing that we're trying to build out in the model in Greenville is connecting individuals to resources. So if it is non-payment of rent, we have a way to connect them with, organizations, or if there's some funds out there, we're hoping to, remedy the solution and still also make the landlord whole. I think it's that mindset with landlords that is so one-sided, tenant-focused solution where we're trying to help everybody. Because we do understand that there are some issues that will arise where eviction is needed. But if there's some way that we can help, that's what we're also trying to do.
Yes, I think that's a great point, that it's not adversarial. It's not landlord versus tenant. It's how can we work together to make sure the tenant remains housed and the landlord remains paid? It's a
Exactly.
positive thing. And I know that when and if this comes out, is it still potentially going to go through county council? Is that the next process, to your knowledge?
Yes.
And I have alerts on my email for agenda items and that kind of thing. So I'll
Update.
see when it's there. Yeah, I think we should all go
Yeah,
when
I
they're
agree.
bringing it up. Like I think us that volunteer with the Homeless Alliance and from the Apartment Association, and then if and when this becomes a thing in Greenville, a lot of education will need to take place, and likely pretty rapidly. And to your point, it should speed up the process, like you said, because it depends. Because if you're going through, and some listeners may know this, some may not, if an eviction is a civil lawsuit, and if you're going through a local magistrate's office, they're also serving other civil lawsuits and the gamut of those. In addition to criminal, some of them have criminal cases that they're hearing too, and certain documentation that has to be served in accordance with those cases. This would be a court that only handles evictions. So they're not
Eviction.
bottlenecking in with the rest of the cases being filed at that particular magistrate's office.
Yeah, I think it'll be positive for the community as a whole. And we've seen that in Charleston and Richland County. It's reduced the rates for filings and evictions. It's, helps to keep people housed. So we definitely want to see if we can, bring this solution to our community as well.
Comes closer and closer to being an agenda item. I know we'll definitely keep the community informed and our stakeholders
Definitely.
informed, our members of the apartment associations, so that everyone understands what the real goal is here. Like this is not adversarial. It's how can we work together, make this an easier process to navigate for both landlord and tenant, with hopefully more desirable outcome of keeping the apartments occupied, keeping the
Right.
rent paid. And I think we've already kind of talked about this, but what keeps you up at night, DJ?
I believe that for me, it's the individuals that, have children that are unhoused. There was the numbers came out for the 2023-2024 school year, and the number of students that have self-identified as homeless is well over the thousands in Greenville County. And it's heartbreaking. I think recently I've seen where he's put bus stops in hotels or motels where families are living out of, and it affects children. Like, how are you supposed to focus on schoolwork or homework or be a child if you don't have a place to lay your head? So that's one of those things that has me up at night. Just seeing what solutions have worked in other communities and what can we do more of? Like how can we help?
Just having been recently in a Greenville County school myself, I had to pick my son up early the other day, and I noticed on the desk or at the front of the desk there was an informational sign asking them if they had a place to live. I'm like, whoa, we're here. This is the
Yeah,
reality that it's posted in bold and conspicuous language that resources are available. These are the steps you need to follow if you find yourself homeless, and as a child and as a student. And it's like, wow, we're here, and the need is real, and it's now, and the time to act. If anyone has ever wanted to get involved, the time is absolutely right now. And if the community wants to help, what are the current needs of the Greenville Homeless Alliance?
so we will be actually post a needs list for individuals once they're in housing, Amazon wish list of simple things, pot pans and or sheet linens, things that individuals will need as they move into housing. But also we're getting ready to launch a campaign to raise more funds to help subsidize individuals' rent that are on a fixed income. We've been kind of testing that pilot, just in month two. So yeah, I would say watch out for social media as well as our website for current needs for Greenville Homeless Alliance moving forward.
And I'll post a link on the podcast when this gets released. When that comes out, I'll go back and edit the post so that it's right there on LinkedIn. Of course, the podcast is where any other podcast could be found, so that listeners can go back, find those needs, and hopefully do some adding to cart. And as we're doing our Christmas shopping, most of us don't want for nothing. We don't need
Yeah.
anything, really and
Right.
truly. It's, does my mom need, I'm just going to laugh at me, does my mom need another pair of bedroom shoes? That kind of thing. She loves them, and I normally get them for her. But and sometimes families do this. Like, I know our family has at one point, my father delivered the mail for the better part of 30 years. So did my mother, and Lydia Mill in Clinton. And my dad, one year, he had a family on his route. We didn't do Christmas for each other that year because, again, we're pretty fortunate. We bought gifts for that family. And if people are and that was the best, like, the gift of giving really is amazing. And we're right in the holiday season, so folks have that opportunity to give to the those that are in need, those that truly need it, because most of us really don't need and want for anything. It's more of a gesture to show that you're caring about someone in your family, than it is fulfilling a need that's out there, in our own backyards, really. And the last question I always ask, because I'm personally a big hip hop head, love my gangster rap. But people always find that funny. And like last night, we're collecting money for PAC, and I've got cash, and I'm like, cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, What is y'all? That's right. And then they were like, "Woo!" One person noticed it and was like, "Woo, Tay, woo, Tay."
Yep.
Like, yes. Oh my gosh. I love it. But what is your favorite song and why?
I would say Lift Off. It is by Jay-Z, Beyonce, and Kanye West. It's one of my favorites. It kind of keeps me motivated. I am very big in affirmations and astrology and all things positive, right? So that's one of those songs that keeps me going. Like I always striving for the stars.
And that you are, and doing a phenomenal job. The difference you're making in the community is life changing. You're changing people's lives, and that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, is how can we pay it forward? And you're a prime example of that, and having a servant's heart. And for the time you were little, like she and I talked off camera. I'm big into affirmations and manifestations and that kind of thing. In the Bible, it says, as a man thinketh, so is he. So if you can get your mind around it, you can achieve it. And
Exactly.
that was already aligning for you as a young lady growing up, that they were coming to you for the resources. Little did you know it was providing you with a skill set that you would need.
Yes.
Later down the line. Your steps were being ordered even then, and the community is going to be made better and is being made better because of it. And just want to thank you for all you do for the community, and thank you guys for welcoming me with open arms into the collaboration group.
Thank you for volunteering. Thank you so much. You have been a very big part of the collaboration working group, brought a ton of people with you, so we thank you as well.
Of course, that's what it's all about. We've got to leave it better than we found it, because we're not here for a long time. We've got to make a difference with the time that it is that we have here. And thank you so much again for coming on to this episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And that's a wrap on today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work together with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something new. Now, go be a voice. Until next time, Spills out.